right and what's wrong. But on this night, we do what we want. We make our own rules. This is our night. This is
our show.
On this night, we rise.
This is the bleeding edge of science, technology, and ethics. This is
Solution. Unwilling to submit.
We learn all that is learnable.
Tonight, power shifts. Tonight, we raise our instruments of anarchy.
Peaceful coexistence, encryption, software, secure devices, and our minds.
Tonight, we are unbound by law.
It's time for Sovryn Tech. And now your host, the golden stallion of the tech world, the rated R radio star, Brian Sovryn.
You better believe it! It's time for some Sovryn Tech, baby! The Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, ready to go one more time. And, look, I told you, I know, I said last week, I said I'd be back in the studio, but folks, sorry not sorry. I am still on location for various reasons. We had a bit of a family emergency, but I'm on the handy dandy H1, the H1 Zoom. I love this little microphone. You cannot imagine just how comforted I feel that I can literally like slip this thing in my pocket and I can record at any time, whenever, because I tell you, my life is just a long list of situations where I need to be able to rise to any occasion. And you know that the Golden Stallion can do it, baby. So anyway, always happy to have it. Always comforting to have it around. If there's a little bit less of audio quality, that's the deal. But most likely next week I will be back in the studio ready to go. And man, we are almost to episode 200. This is episode 186, and I have some good times planned for when episode 200 comes around. And of course, if you're a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/sovereigntech, you can find out all about that. But man, talking about beating the heat. Of course, I'm a Northeastern boy, New England particularly, and it has been in the 90s for, it seems like forever. And I cannot wait to get back to my ice planet Zero. I need to be there. Not that I mind the heat. I mean, I'll tell you, it is a beautiful day outside. It is a beautiful. All I can think about when the weather is this nice, all I can think about is doing a good old fashioned flag burning. Like any good anarchist should. But whatever. Maybe I'll get to that later on. Maybe I'll take some video. But I love it. Get some hot dogs ready. Woo. Anyway, if you're not, I just want to get this out of the way early on in the show. So there's not going to be, we're not going to do set segments just like last week. I wasn't able to do set segments because of the nature of working off of the H1, but it's fine. People enjoyed the shit out of last week's episode, so I guess you're all right with that. But we'll get back to doing the set segments next week. I mean, I'll still cover stories like set segments through this episode. So if you're not a Patreon subscriber, like I was saying, you get all the insights on that. I really want you to check that out. We've got quite a few episodes in that is Patreon subscriber only. So if you want access to that, I do Q&A, covering a lot of really great topics at other points, doing reviews, all this wild stuff. You need to become a Patreon subscriber for Sovryn Tech. So I want you to jump in on that. Patreon.com/SovrynTech. It'll take you right there, and you can donate. It's a pay what you want model, folks. Okay, however much you want to donate. There's people that have significantly increased how much they're donating through that to me, and I'm really honored by that. But if you become a Sovryn Tech patron, or you get your access to that Sovryn Tech subscriber content, I like to think it's all been a very good time and that people have really been enjoying it. I've gotten some great response from that. And also, I'll tell you, and I talked about this briefly on recent Patreon on subscriber content, but I'll just say it here, real quick. Like, Patreon is such an amazing platform. I am not reliant upon it. If Patreon shut down tomorrow, I could easily, I have a whole system in place to pick right up where that left off. So, it's okay if it shuts down. But while it's here, hot damn, I mean, what a great, it has everything. It's a social media network. It has private messaging, which is how a lot of people are getting questions to me now, which makes it really easy for me because my email inbox is just nuts. And that I'm not necessarily complaining. I mean, I'm honored that so many people want to get in touch with me about all this, but it really is crazy. But I mean, you can use the Patreon messaging service through that, and that's a great filter. It's to some degree for me to know, okay, what questions do I really need to get to, and whatever. So that's handy. But I mean, you can even, you can favorite stuff, heart stuff. You can you can follow stuff on Patreon. I mean, and the new mobile app for Patreon. Holy shit. Patreon, I'm not doing an advertisement for them here. I'm just saying that it's impressive what you can do. I mean, their mobile app now, which I remember installing it like a year ago, and it didn't do a whole hell of a lot, so it didn't really do anything for me. But I reinstalled it recently now that, I have the subscriber content on Patreon. But the mobile app has everything. I can respond to people, through the messaging. I can write posts on there. I mean, I can even do blog posts on there. It's just so incredible what that offers. If you are, I will recommend to you, if you are building, your own little content empire or a little content community, you could do far worse than utilizing everything that Patreon offers. And I don't know, I mean, I hope they're getting a lot of backing for something, because the amount of money that they collect, because, they take a cut. That's how all this works. That's how the whole payment system that they have works. The amount of money, the very small amount of money that they collect from each transaction, I don't know how that makes up for the fact that you can literally post and host anything on there. It kind of baffles the mind. But anyway, I'm glad they're out there. I really like the service. I wish they would take Bitcoin, but they don't. So, maybe I've requested that of them. Maybe that's something they'll implement in the future, since they already go through Stripe, and Stripe takes Bitcoin. So they're just one little tick box, I think, away from being able to do that. But I mean, if they did that, honestly, I think they'd be at the point of perfection. Would they ever take Ethereum? I don't give a shit if they ever take Ethereum. Ethereum's falling apart at the seams, which, if you listen to last night's all new Sex and Science Hour, it was episode 17, you can hear us talk about that. And actually, I'll put this right out there. I think I might have reversed. I don't know. It was a late night, and it really was a late night. I think I might have reversed the definition of ETH and ETC, or which camp those belong to. But whatever, you get my points. Like I said in that episode, I think everything I had to say was still salient, regardless of a lot of the details. But yeah, do give that episode a listen. And of course, we did it, like I was saying with Patreon, had new Patreon content come out yesterday as well. And last bit before we get into the random access, and then we're gonna run straight through, no breaks for 2 hours, folks. This show is sponsored also not only by the Sovryn Tech patrons, but by one of the greatest businesses on the planet today. I am so honored to have them as a sponsor, and they have re-upped to be a sponsor. So thank you, Sovryn Tech listeners, for patronizing them. Patronize. Is that the right term? Anyway, for going through them, thank you so much. That is Roberts and Roberts Brokerage, okay? rrbi.co, or you can go through gold.zog.ninja. And you can get, if you want to get precious metals, you want to get gold, silver, platinum, palladium, you want to get some coins, bars, whatever, you want to get the good stuff, you want to go through Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. We're talking serious cold storage, serious secured storage, okay, of your wealth. And it's just, like I said, they are one of the best businesses on the planet today. They've been in business for decades. Tim Fry's been running them for over a decade now, and he is just top notch. He is just just a sweetheart of a guy. I did an interview with him on this show. I think I might have him on again, not even to really talk about Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. I want to do an episode where we kind of, because he's been in the tech world longer than I've existed on planet Earth. he's been around and he has stories to tell, and I'd love to have him on. And other people, kind of have like a classic computing roundup. I think that'd be phenomenal, to do. So anyway, but if you want to get your hands on just great prices, or even if you want to sell some off, and if you want to use Bitcoin to do it, we're just talking about Bitcoin. If you want to use Bitcoin to get your hands on it, believe me, Tim Fry prefers dealing with you in Bitcoin to get your hands on some gold and silver. I want you to go to rrbi.co or gold.zog.ninja. Just let him know the Golden Stallion sent you, okay? And believe me, Tim is a listener of the show. He knows the deal, okay? He's on board with it. He'll know what you're talking about when you say the Golden Stallion sent me here, baby, to get golden. So head over there, Robertson Roppers Brokerage. You can't beat it. And link in the show notes if you really need it for every episode of Sovereign Tech since they've been a sponsor. So thank you again to Robertson Roppers Brokerage for being a sponsor of Sovereign Tech. All right, so let's get into let's do this. Let's get into the random access. We got a lot of different stories to cover this week. Some very interesting ones, actually. More unique than what I talk about regularly, I guess, on Sovereign Tech. So it should be fun. But with the random access, oh boy, let's start it off with honestly some bad news. It turns out Blackphone, which I've talked about and. I support Blackphone. This is the company, Silent Circle. Blackphone is this, Phil Zimmerman's there. I mean, there's some great names involved with it, but it was the idea of creating a smartphone. And I think they even had a tablet coming out too, because they had the Blackphone 1, then there's the Blackphone 2 and the Blackphone Plus, I think, which is like a tablet style device. They're trying to create these really privacy centric smartphones, and they had their own version, like they modified their own version of Android. I think it was Privacy OS or Priva OS, something like that. And I've talked about it before, and I love the spirit of what they're doing, but I've always been a little skeptical because it's like, okay, yeah, I appreciate what you're doing, but and they bought out, and actually here's where some of the problems come in. They bought out the smartphone manufacturers, Geeksphone, they're a company out of Spain that was creating Blackphone. But my problem always came down to, it's like, okay, all of this is great, but are you making the SIM cards? Because SIM cards, as we know over the years, are have the great potential to be a security exploit, and they have been exploited for as long as there have been SIM cards. Really, like the keys that control the security of the SIM card and all that have been handed over to the NSA many times. Blah blah blah. And as far as I know, they never took over control of manufacturing the SIM cards. And so at that point, it's just like, well, yeah, this is better than nothing. I agree with that. And I love sending the market signal that people want, a privacy oriented hardware. I love that. But at the end of the day, it's certainly not perfect security. Now, I mean, we can get into the philosophical, argument of, can you ever actually have perfect security? Yeah, maybe not, but there are steps that we know you can take, that if you're not taking them, you're really not going as far as you can. I understand that argument. Steve Gibson brings that up often enough on Security Now, which is, we can't get to perfect security, blah, 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 blah. And I agree with that. But that, of course, my answer to that, and if you go to darkandroid.info, you can you can look into this more. My answer to, if you can't get perfect security, but boy, your life is really on the line, like, or you're doing some business that is definitely very, very hot, to say, to put it in, I guess, legal terms. You want to foster anonymity. Okay, you got to run with anonymity. That's how you solve a lot of the potential security exploits out there, that exist with pretty much all hardware. But anyway, so one of the things that I was waiting to hear that Blackphone could do would be to actually manufacture the SIM cards themselves. As far as I know, that never happened. But regardless of all that, okay, they have, on the business end of things, they have run into quite a bit of trouble, it sounds like. They recently have, this is news coming from this month, July 2016, they have laid off 20 people. Now, you might be saying, 20 people? Come on, that's not a whole lot of people. Well, when you're a small company, that's 15% of their workforce. Percentage-wise, that's a large amount of people getting laid off, even though, it's only 20 people, right? We'll talk about Cyanogen Mod here, or Cyanogen Inc. in a second here, because they also have been experiencing some layoffs. But that's been going on. Also, like I mentioned, they had bought out Geeksphone, but apparently Geeksphone has yet to receive the payment for that, or however that worked out. It was some $30 million. There's however that worked out as far as shares and actual cash in hand. I'm not entirely certain, but the bottom line is that where a lot of this trouble is coming from, all of these problems, be it Silent Circle becoming to some degree insolvent, perhaps, or and laying people off, is that black phones aren't selling. Now, why aren't they selling? I mean, did they misread the fact? Did Silent Circle misread the fact that people are interested in having private, privacy-centric hardware? Maybe. I think people do want that. I don't think, but I mean, it's just, I don't think, because I think that's where the blame comes in, is that, there actually isn't a market for this. I disagree. I think there's a lack of education on what it takes to get, to have a really privacy-oriented device, to have a really secure device. There's a lack of education, not a lack of desire. I think that's really the deal. And also, I mean, it's interesting to note, and we've talked about this on Sovryn Tech when the story broke. I think when the Blackphone 2 came out and they upgraded Privacy OS or Priva OS, whatever it was called, they did say that, because before they did the right thing, in my opinion, which was they didn't include the Google Play Store. In the Blackphone 1, there was no Google Play Store, and it wasn't a part of the program. And that's good, because the Play Store, it's just opening up your entire phone to Google by having that on there. When the Blackphone 2 came out, then they allowed they had the the Google Play Store pre-installed. I thought that was a failure. And I've talked about this many times. Folks, you can do all this wonderful stuff as far as privacy goes, blah, 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 blah. You can have all this shit set up and, oh yeah, everything's secure. And then all you have to do is install Facebook Messenger, and your security, right out the door. Gone. Just fucking forget it. It kills me too, because in the circles that I run in, I have a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, I care very much about security, blah, blah, blah. What should I do? Or I even have people, contact me. It's like, yeah, I really want to get anonymous, and because of certain business dealings I'm doing, or, things like this. And it's like, okay, are you using Facebook Messenger? Oh yeah, I've got it installed. And it's just like, are you kidding me? And then they don't want to uninstall it. And you can't use the mobile website anymore. That Facebook's fucking with that. We've talked about that in the past. But Facebook Messenger, they're going to end-to-end encryption, right? So, everything will be fine. Folks, metadata is just as damning as regular data, as the text that they can see, if not sometimes even more so. And that, just installing, the problem is all the permissions that, Facebook Messenger wants of your phone. And you can't necessarily block those. And I know there's been people that have claimed that they've set it up so that some of that stuff could be blocked. First off, it's not a hardware switch, so you're kind of taking the software on faith that stuff is blocked. And also, I haven't really seen where that's necessarily true. Because it is crazy what Facebook asks for as far as permissions. Anyway, I'm getting into a topic I didn't want to go down. But bottom line is that all the security in the world means nothing if people want to be on Facebook. If they want to use Facebook apps or whatever, that's the deal. So Blackphone was already conceding to some degree failure back when the Blackphone 2 came out, because they installed the Google Play Store. Again, it really doesn't matter. It's not that people don't want this sort of thing. It's just that there is an education problem with all that. And what really pisses me off with companies like this? And when we talk about Cyanogen, it's kind of the same deal. If you want people to buy this shit, you've got to do advertising. You don't have to do any ugly advertising where you're collecting something. You've got to do scattershot advertising. You've got to do TV. You've got to do radio. Folks, most people still listen to the radio when they get in their car. Now, maybe a lot of people that listen to this show don't realize it because they live in San Francisco bullshit, okay, or whatever. But the average person around the world, and even just in America, still listens to the radio. If you want to get people buying your shit, you've got to advertise. Okay? I know that. Even my video games, I've advertised on radio. And I know I got sales out of it. All right. I mean, so it's not all I can't remember what episode it was where I covered this, but like a lot of these metrics that somehow you think you can target advertising, it's bullshit. It doesn't work. And you're crazy for thinking that, well, if I just create a Facebook page or if I just create a Twitter page or something like that, that'll be my advertising strategy. You're nuts for thinking that works. And you know who all these blockchain companies, which 90% of them that are Bitcoin companies, which I've been in the space for a few years, folks, and I've talked to them about advertising. They're gone. They don't even exist anymore. Because these people won't advertise. You don't understand. If you want actual growth, if you want everyday people using your shit, you've got to reach out to them in the venues that they have. You cannot bring the horse to water. Or you can bring the horse to water. You can't make him drink or whatever. Well, you're not even trying to bring the horse to water. Just fucking stupid. So, I mean, in some way, honestly, like, I have no sympathy for what's happening with Blackphone. There's great people there. I love the spirit of what they're doing. Don't misunderstand me, okay? But all of these efforts to get people involved in using, more privacy oriented software, hardware, whatever else, okay? It's all bullshit until you actually get serious and try to reach out to them. And I mean, look, if they were going to buy out Geeks Phone for $30 million, for fuck's sake, for a year, it won't even cost you six figures to advertise, in a lot of venues where you could reach people that really need this sort of thing. So fuck fuck these companies. God damn it. Oh man, I get hot. Talk about getting hot. I get white hot about this. It pisses me off to no end. And it's not because, to some degree, it's self-serving because, yes, I want to have sponsors and advertisers, and I want to reach people, with this stuff. But I get a lot of emails from people. Okay, getting into kind of a side subject here, but whatever. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. I get a lot of emails from people, and sometimes anonymous, and that's fine because I want things to be anonymous. Okay, I don't need to know your name. I get emails from people that say, oh, have you checked this out? Have you looked at this? And honestly, like, I'm to the point, and this is sort of why I've gotten away from Q&A in episodes of Sovryn Tech, unless I really, like, because, I mean, I've made, a lot of acquaintances and even friends, or, well, acquaintances, whatever, through Sovryn Tech. Unless I know you and you're telling me to talk about a product, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't care what it is. A recent one that I did that I talked about on a Patreon episode of Sovryn Tech was Cortana. If somebody emails me and said, could you talk about Cortana? No. And I mean, I'm kind of breaking it now, but I'm using it to make a point because I don't know that it's not Cortana themselves just emailing me saying, hey, I'm really excited about this. Could you talk about it? And they get free marketing out of me. Fuck you. Cross my palm with silver if you want me to talk about your shit. Don't pull these stupid tricks. Okay, because honestly, they're really not even gonna work, and you're just wasting my time. If you want people to get on board with your stuff, you cannot rely upon a TechCrunch story, once a year. You cannot rely upon, a Facebook page or a Twitter account. You've got to do good old-fashioned advertising. And believe me, like even, a blurb on a web page, I mean, that's not enough. Okay. Oh, for fuck's sake. So Blackphone's tanking. Well, that's what you get. You didn't try to reach out to anybody. I mean, and come on, most people are watching these dumbass Alaska shows on Destination Bumfuck. Okay, the channel or whatever in the higher 600s on some Comcast subscription or whatever. And I cannot believe that advertising through those venues costs a ton of money, but I guarantee you those are the people you need to be educating. And you're not. So fuck off. Go ahead, burn, you fucking company. I mean, peacefully, of course. Oh. They're so full of it. So many of these companies, we're trying to reach grandma. Well, guess what? Grandma really isn't on Facebook. It's very rare that grandma's there. She sure as hell isn't on Twitter, and she sure as hell isn't reading TechCrunch. Man. Anyway, so Silent Circle, Blackphone, their whole idea is tanking. Again, this is not because I've talked about it. I said, look, the crypto economy is a real thing. It's coming. Okay. It's not from lack of desire. I think people want this sort of thing, especially older people. You ask them, they're the only ones that get it. In many ways, they're the only normal people, because they're like, well, why the fuck would I post? Why would I tag, this person into this photo? I didn't ask them about that. They're the ones that still understand privacy. Everybody else is fucking, I don't know, their brains are scrambled. This is your brain on Facebook. Any questions? So reach out to them. And they have money. Fuck. Anyway, let's shift gears here. Cyanogen mod, or Cyanogen Inc., I should say. Not necessarily shifting gears. They have also run into some degree of trouble, it seems. They have laid off, and they're a company of only a little over 100 people. They have laid off some 30 employees. And there were claims that they were getting away from concentrating on their operating system itself, and that they are working more towards maybe apps or this sort of thing. Then the head of Cyanogen Inc., which, understand, Cyanogen Inc. is separate from Cyanogen Mod. There is money that it's kind of like Red Hat and Fedora, Red Hat Linux and Fedora. How Red Hat, yes, is the company, and the stuff trickles down into the very open source Fedora. But they are two separate animals, and what happens in one doesn't necessarily affect the other. So I think that, with Cyanogen Inc., they're running into some degree of financial troubles. And again, I've applauded what Cyanogen wants to do. They are, their big company claim was that we will take Android away from Google. And I think that's a fine and dandy thing. And I think that shows that, yes, there is interest in this, and people realize that Android itself is an issue being under the control of Google. Like that there are genuine concerns with that, privacy concerns and even security concerns and whatever else. So Cyanogen, this isn't a surprise either, because Cyanogen Inc. has worked with other companies to put out, they worked with Oppo, they worked with OnePlus, in the past anyway, to where they, Cyanogen OS, not Cyanogen Mod, these are two different things. Cyanogen OS was, baked into the phone initially. And that I think they could even still have, G apps. They could still have the Google Play Store installed, which that's a problem, but whatever. Anyway. So that company's running into some degree of trouble. They've made other claims that they're just, they're honing down and they're not, like, they're saying that they're not getting away from the OS business and that Cyanogen Mod is fine. I agree. Cyanogen Mod is going to be totally fine out of all this. That's not going anywhere because that's largely a community effort. That doesn't have a whole lot to do. It existed before there was Cyanogen Inc., and I think it would exist after, say, a Cyanogen Inc. Disappeared. I really don't think that this is necessarily a big deal. I could see that the company, might be. I could maybe they see that smartphones are not the future and that they need to concentrate elsewhere and look into newer platforms. I think that would be a very smart move. In fact, honestly, like if I was Cyanogen Inc., if I had that kind of, that open source Android compatible system, framework behind me, I would very much be looking into wearables right now. I would be looking at Android Wear, or smartwatches in general, and I would come out with one that could work with Android Wear 2.0 apps. Like I would be leapfrogging, because that is what finally brings profitability, right? Like it should not be a surprise that Amazon for decades was not profitable, and then suddenly the Amazon Echo comes out and holy shit, they have a profitable quarter. What happened there? Were they selling a bunch of Amazon Echoes? No, but they leapfrogged, entire technology ecosystems. And by doing that, the new category that they created with the Echo, made people want to interact more with Amazon. Okay, so that's the same thing that Cyanogen. I'm hoping that's what they have in mind. I have no idea, but that's the dream. That's what I would do. They don't have to listen to me. Okay, but also, in the same vein, we're talking earlier about the fact that they don't advertise. Cyanogen, never bothered to advertise. I mean, Android for a long time didn't really advertise, but now there's TV advertisements for Nexus devices and Android in general all over the place. And now suddenly, people are switching over to Android. Is it because iOS has gotten long in the tooth? Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. But maybe part of it is that, well, the average person now knows that Android exists. As to where, because Apple's marketing machine it might be the greatest in the world. It's huge, and what it does, how they the delivery, everything is just fantastic. Because I've heard, believe me, a lot of anecdote, and I imagine there's a lot of statistical evidence. Okay, but I've heard of plenty of anecdotes where literally grandma says, "I need the new iPhone." They don't. The average grandma could do just as well with an iPhone, 3S. It was the iPhone 3S today. But no, they get hot and bothered and they're like, oh, I want that new iPhone 6S. Or when the iPhone 7 comes out, oh, I want that iPhone 7 because of the great marketing. And Apple does well because it's kind of guaranteed money from these people because, they don't buy a whole lot of devices necessarily every year. It's a locked-in customer for a while. Again, if Cyanogen's running into any financial troubles, in my opinion, it really all comes down to the fact that they will not do any kind of traditional advertising, and they've bought in to the bullshit narrative that, that just working through social media totally for free, or even just, spending $15 a month to I don't know, do some kind of targeting advertising on Facebook is somehow working for them, and it's not. So, whatever. I do think, and another possibility that could come out of the whole thing with Cyanogen Inc. Maybe there's the chance, and I could believe this, and this will actually segue into my next story with random access. Maybe what's going to happen is that Microsoft is going to buy them out, and they could be laying people off to not have to spread so much of the of the sale around, because people get they get options, they get various benefits from selling off a company if they're an employee. So maybe dumping some of these people is really just it's a prelude to acquisition by Microsoft, because Microsoft has been working very tightly with Cyanogen Inc. They already invested in Cyanogen Inc. So I imagine they have with that investment they probably asked for some degree of buying options to acquire the company. In the future or whatever, and I could see that. I could see that happening. Even though understand, Windows 10 Mobile is not something that I think Microsoft is necessarily giving up on. They are definitely changing their view. But so this is what I think Microsoft's strategy is right now. This is really what's kind of coming to light. And like I said, this is actually going to lead into the random access very nicely. I think that Microsoft is really planning. They have like operating systems, and in some ways even apps are just window dressing, no pun intended. I think what they're doing like right now, the real window dressing is Cortana, and I think this is what Microsoft is really concentrating on. Microsoft's main business right now, in my opinion, is Azure. Okay, which is their whole server business. It's their version of Amazon's AWS. And Azure is like the second largest of its kind. Right next to AWS. And I think that's their real business. And Cortana is more or less like the ultimate window dressing of their entire ecosystem of Word and and Office and all this different stuff. And that's really like Cortana is really the operating system today. That doesn't mean there aren't still going to, like when I've talked about Windows Midori, or not Windows, when I've talked about Microsoft Midori and all this different stuff, I still think all of these things are going to come to fruition. But keep in mind, Windows 10 Mobile, all these different platforms that Microsoft has, really all of it is, confluencing with Cortana. Like that, it's my opinion on it. And I could see them buying, my point being is I could see Microsoft buying Cyanogen, okay, having their own version of Android, and that they would have that out there. And you'd say, well, isn't this fragmentation? How many operating systems is Microsoft going to have? Well, first off, how many operating systems does fucking Apple have? Which, by the way, there was a story this week that every single one of those operating systems had the same flaw as Android. It was comparable to the Stagefright flaw in with Android that we've talked about in the past, where it's an exploit that you could receive, a text message effectively. And of course, in Apple's case, it would be through iMessage, and a person could get near total control, of the hardware, of the system that you're using. And this is true in Apple's case. This is far worse than Android, because in this case, you get an iMessage, and it could affect OS 10 or Mac OS. It could affect TV OS, Watch OS, and iOS. Their entire platform has this massive security flaw or security exploit. Terrible. Anyway, so, Apple has a lot of different operating systems, so I don't see why Microsoft, wouldn't do that either. Of course, I'm sure all the Apple fanboys would insult Microsoft for doing it, but whatever. I mean, that's not new news. Pot kettle black. But, because the real feature here, the real operating system that Microsoft is pushing now is Cortana itself. And Cortana works anywhere. It works great on Android. So, of course, they would buy out Cyanogen. And it just interacts. It can sit anywhere. So I could really see that, happening to where they buy out Cyanogen. And I could see that perhaps Cyanogen is prepping for a buyout. Cyanogen Inc. This will not, again, CyanogenMod is a totally open source, not totally, but largely community-run operating system. I don't think that would go away. Cyanogen OS, on the other hand, is a very different story. That might become some version of Microsoft Android or something like that. But again, the whole point is to get all that data and to get that platform integrated into Cortana, because that's the real window dressing, as it were, because that's the gateway to Microsoft's Azure, or everything that's on Azure. And a lot of companies keep adding themselves into the Azure platform. So that just putting that theory out there, Cortana's the real thing. Now that leads into the other story, which is there was the claim. Now we have the anniversary update, which I've talked about for Windows 10 anniversary update, which in just a few days, August 2nd, I believe, is when it gets pushed out there. Okay, this is probably the largest update to Windows 10 since it came out last year. And of course, that's why it's called Anniversary Edition, because Windows 10 came out July 29, 2015. There is the claim, there is the widespread headline pariah that says you can't turn off Cortana in Windows 10. They're forcing it on you. And yes, to some degree, certainly Microsoft is no angel. I don't support Microsoft really in so much of what they do. They're not. There's a problem with the headline, and it comes from a complete misunderstanding of what exactly it means with, Cortana's new roles in the anniversary update of Windows 10. And by the way, you have to update to the anniversary update. Like, you don't have a choice on that, and that is bullshit too. I agree. Okay, but what's going on here isn't so terrible as a lot of these tech journalists are claiming. What's really happening is that a lot of features within Windows 10. Okay, let me backpedal. The way you turn off Cortana now, in the anniversary update, you can still turn off Cortana in that fashion. What has, so the personal assistant side, you can turn off and all that. What has changed is some of the features, like Bing and some other things, inside of Windows 10 itself has been renamed Cortana, which, in my opinion, is evidence of exactly what I was just saying, that Cortana is really the operating system that Microsoft is pushing out there. Okay, now what aspects of that you want turned on and off, that will, to varying degrees, be allowed to you. Okay, but that's really what's happening here. Yes, you can still turn off Cortana as you always have in the past year with Windows 10. But there are aspects of Windows 10 that have been renamed to Cortana that you cannot turn off. But you couldn't turn those off before either. So nothing has actually changed. Or at least very few things have actually changed, other than there's just a rebranding system-wide. So the idea that you can't turn Cortana off anymore is bullshit. But it makes for a great headline, right? Especially, a lot of the Apple and Google fanboys and whatever, they get, they don't care about your privacy, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not saying Microsoft necessarily does. But that's it. That's really the story behind it. I don't have to spend a whole ton of time on that. But do pay attention to Cortana, because that is, I think Microsoft right now is betting on that being their future. And as I've said for years on this show, I think I don't like the idea of virtual assistants necessarily, especially ones run by gigantic, corporations. But as far as within that paradigm, which one is the best one? Cortana has been far and away the best one. Consistently, like Siri has become less and less useful they've designed it to be less powerful than it was in the past. Apple has. Google Now, okay. Google Now is, unless you live in a metropolitan area, heavily, big one, Google Now is largely worthless based upon what they say it can do. Those features mean nothing to you if you live in the country. That's really, maybe you disagree, but that's my opinion on that. I pull no punches. Look, folks, I'm not a fanboy of any of them. I don't give a shit about any of these companies. Okay, but I'm just telling you, a lot of times these narratives are crap, and the one with that you can't turn off Cortana is certainly a crap narrative. So, all right, let's see what other stories do we have to get into. Well, here's an interesting one. Verizon got, finally made the deal official that they are buying Yahoo. Now they're buying certain aspects of Yahoo. This is what's kind of why the story is so convoluted and confusing, is that Yahoo was a massive company and held a lot of different things. There's the Alibaba aspect of Yahoo, which Verizon's not buying that, and which a lot of people think is crazy because that's the one that's really valuable, blah, blah, blah. A lot of the, other aspects of Yahoo are going to other companies, but Verizon, what most people think of when they think Yahoo, I think Yahoo Mail, you think Yahoo News, which is still one of the most visited, I think it is actually the most visited news website on the internet still today. Can you believe that? I can't. but it's true. Yahoo Finance, which actually Yahoo Finance does a hell of a job, as far as finance news goes. OMG, a lot of these different properties that you think of with Yahoo, and I think Tumblr also goes into the Verizon deal. All of this stuff is what Verizon is actually, what they are purchasing, and they're purchasing it for like $4 billion. Now, I remember a few years ago, back when Ballmer was running Microsoft was going to buy Yahoo, and they were going to buy them for $41 billion. At that time, though, Microsoft would have bought it, would have bought everything. They would have gotten Alibaba, the investment in Alibaba. They would have gotten all that. So, I think some people are saying, wow, Steve Ballmer dodged a bullet by not buying Yahoo for $41 billion when, especially since Verizon, could only get them for $4 billion. But Verizon's only buying, isn't buying the whole animal like Ballmer was planning on. So not really. That's kind of another false narrative out there. So Verizon has part of this. Now, this is interesting because, Verizon has really been scooping stuff up. They bought AOL. They bought all kinds of things. Verizon is becoming, the 90s internet, which, as I said, when they bought AOL, and we talked about it on Sovereign Tech, is the point, I think, because the 90s internet is what we are getting back to. Unfortunately, we're not getting back to, in my opinion, we're not getting back to the 90s internet as far as style goes, because I love the style of the 90s internet. Everything was very functional. There wasn't all this bullshit Flash content that you had to deal with, and it was a major problem, even though Flash is dying off, thankfully. It was, things were about function and information. I like that. The 90s internet was what I think the internet really should be. Maybe that's my own desires, whatever, fine. But what the 90s internet was more so was a series, a group of walled gardens. This is the part I don't like. Okay, not necessarily anyway. You had AOL, you had CompuServe, you had Prodigy, and then you had like your little, local kind of ISP fiefdoms of sorts, that offered all very unique content. Like with AOL, you could get on the internet, right? You could get on, the World Wide Web, but there was exclusive content on AOL. And understand, even today, like AOL owns a lot of properties. They own TechCrunch, as I mentioned, and some other things. Huffington Post, I think they own that too. Anyway, but you couldn't do vice versa. Okay, you could, from AOL, you could get to the World Wide Web, but from the World Wide Web, you used to, at least in the 90s, you couldn't get to all that exclusive AOL content, which used to be pretty expansive. And I think we're going back to that time to where you're going to have the walled gardens, where Verizon is going to effectively have its own internet. Facebook already, people are finally seeing this, even though I've been saying it for years, already has their own little internet. Not so little either. Apple will have its own internet. Google has its own internet. All these companies will have their own walled gardens that you'll only be able to get into if you have an account with them or if you are paying for them. And I think Verizon is going for that. They are looking to collect on those advertising dollars and doing so by having their own content. I mean, they already have their YouTube competitor, which is Go90. They have a bunch of this different stuff. So this is just another acquisition to really bring in. I'm sure Tumblr makes a lot of sense in this deal. It's not something I'm saying is good. I just understand I'm saying it makes sense, on the business end here for them. That this helps them create their walled garden even more because they're not. How much money can you keep making off of constantly jacking up the rates, especially when there's competitors that people can run to on your dodgy old telco company? Which is what Verizon originally was. And cable's going the way of the dodo, or at least stock cable television as we understand it. So they're not even making money off of that. So they need to do something, and this is what they're doing. I think they're creating their own little walled garden. They are going to become the new AOL, and they already own it. And they're going to become the new Yahoo, and now they own that. So I think that's what's going on there. But $4 billion, it's official. That's going to be, as far as I know, that's just going to be straight happening. What other story we have here? This was an interesting one, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but it really just kind of goes to show the ridiculousness, of course, of governments and of their security agencies. But there was a report that came out that the NSA, in particular, with their X-Keyscore program, which, if you don't know about X-Keyscore, I did an entire special on Sovryn Tech about X-Keyscore. And if you go to sovryntech.com, you could just type in X-Keyscore in the SoundCloud search box at the top, type in X-Keyscore, Sovryn Tech, and you can find the episode. Or you could even, you could go to zog.ninja and you could do the same damn thing. But anyway, X-Keyscore apparently targeted people that were readers of the very popular, kind of quasi-Reddit style site, news site, Linux Journal. It also started targeting you if you were searching for the Tails operating system or if you were looking for Tor. So if you are interested in your privacy, you have become flagged by the NSA over the years. And still, if you are a Linux user, and this is how far it went, like within the reports, as I understand it, it claimed that these people are potential terrorists. So what they're saying to you is that if you use Linux, you are a terrorist. Can you believe that? And you just thought you were using Linux because it's a great goddamn operating system, and you're tired of having to deal with Windows and Mac OS and all the rest. No, you're a terrorist. There you go. You got chalked up. This is what happens. Did Linux get created because Richard Stallman wanted to blow something up or whatever? No, fuck no. But this is what gets crazy about this stuff is that this is the problem with governments is that you can always retroactively go after people for things that they are interested in or doing. And you can retroactively label people as being villains. I think it's an obvious point, but I just want to make sure it gets out there because a lot of people will say, well, look, using I don't know, IRC or using Twitter or something like this, whatever the service is, it's voluntary. Okay, it's fine. Don't worry about using it. Post whatever you want and all this stuff. Well, what happens when your platform of choice becomes the target of the NSA? What happens when your platform of choice, whatever that happens to be, and I'm speaking in the abstract, becomes considered a terrorist act, and then you become labeled a terrorist? This is the issue. Yeah, you want to be careful, or at least be aware, of what you're using and doing. And of course, the real answer to this, the answer to this whole thing is like, if people were educated and everybody was using Linux, or everybody was using Tor, or everybody was using Tails, repeating myself, then what, they can't lock up everybody. Somebody's got to pay those taxes, right? Of course, taxation is theft. So just madness, but, understand that, retroactively you can be held accountable, thanks to governments, based upon what you use, even if you've used it for decades. All right, what other stories? That might be enough for the random access. I do want to mention, I'm going to mention this real quick. I found this show that I thought was really interesting, and I will put a link in the show notes for it, and you can check it out. It's called the Illumination Hour, and it's kind of a science show, does a really great exploration. Check this show out. It's 8 episodes in. It's a podcast, and I thought it was interesting. I put a link in the show notes because it's on Spreaker. I don't know exactly, I hadn't found an RSS feed for it yet, but give that show a listen. Anyway, enough of that. Speaking of the science, let's get into a little bit of science. Let's get away from the tech news. I want to get into some science. How far are we in here? We've been going about an hour. So, woo, and I haven't had anything to drink. Let's do this. Let's talk some science. This is an interesting thing. This is a story. It's from about a year ago. Okay. And I didn't get the chance to get into it yet, but I saw it. Somebody reposted it. About a month ago maybe, and I was like, oh man, this is a fun story. I want to get, I really want to get into that. And this story has to do with something called the Mandela effect. Now, maybe some of my listeners already know what the Mandela effect is, and if you do, awesome, good for you. We're going to talk about it, and I'm going to break it down. But the story I'm going to read to you first off is from Vice.com, from Vice, and it's the Berenstain Bears conspiracy theory that has convinced the internet there are parallel universes. I mean, if that doesn't make you want to click, something I don't know what does. Now the Berenstain Bears, if you don't know, this has been a book series, a child's book series. I think there was even a cartoon, perhaps at one point when I was a kid. I remember that. The Berenstain Bears, it's just this family of bears that goes through various adventures, and there's a little morality play usually in each book. And I remember, I was born in 1981. I remember these books very well. Or at least I think I remember them very well. We'll talk about that here. But there is this issue with the Berenstain Bears that has come up for thousands, if not millions of people, that is really interesting. So let's read the story here before I get into, and then we'll break it down as to what might actually be going on here. Here's the story. The Berenstain Bears. These fuzzy critters are hands down some of the most beloved children's literature characters of the modern age. Whom among us hasn't learned a valuable, if not a little heavy-handed, lesson from Brother and Sister Bear? The bears taught us such varied lessons as, you should stop being a little greedy asshole and share. And if you bite your nails, you're a gross, disgusting person who deserves to be a pariah among your family. The treehouse living bears love us so much that they're still teaching us, technically grown-ups, important lessons today. And they have one final major lesson in store for us. We all live in an alternate reality, and nothing we know is real. You could say that they are our Neo of sorts. The bears are communicating, Neo, of course, reference to the Matrix. The bears are communicating these newfound realities to us through their name. Take a cold, hard look at the wording above. Does something look wrong to you? Do you remember it being Berenstain with an E and not Berenstain with an A? And here's the rub, Stallion breaking in. So this is how you spell Berenstain. Berenstain. However, there's also the spelling where it's all that, except instead of the A at the end, or towards the end, it's an E. So it's Berenstain. Let's read on. If you do, you're not alone. As in, if you remember it with an E towards the end instead of an A, there's something interesting going on here. There are many people who remember it this way, reading on. In fact, there are so many Berenstain believers that people in the know will cite that as proof that this is a glitch in the Matrix. I've dubbed these individuals Berenstainites. I talked to, and that's with an E. I've talked to quite a few people I know, and most of them remember the bear's surname being spelled with an E. Quote, I only realized that A reading to my kid about 8 months ago, end quote, one of my friends said. Quote, that was a disturbing bedtime, end quote. To be completely honest, I am one with the believers of the E. I personally remember vividly the Berenstain Bears being spelt with an E and calling it that for years. As in, it should be pronounced, if it has an A, Stallion breaking it should be pronounced Berenstain, right? Instead of Berenstain. Even during the writing of this piece, reading on, the misspelled name is right there on the tip of my tongue. I constantly need to go back and change all of the Berenstains to Berenstains because my mind is so set in its way. Learning that I have been wrong all these years has caused what can only be described as a personal crisis of sorts. And there's a tweet from him saying, I always figured something would eventually break me mentally and emotionally. I never thought it would be the Berenstain Bears. The Berenstain Bear theory has been around for a few years, but it exploded last week when Run the Jewels, rapper, music producer, and possible Berenstainite EIP, I think, went on. I assume, of course, a weed-powered tweeting spree about it. So some rapper, brought it to fore, I guess. Unlike many other conspiracy theories, the doctrine of the Berenstains seems to be gaining traction due to the fact that readers can take a side. There's Team Stein and Team Stain, and some of the people misremembering the fact, whatever they think that fact is, see that misremembrance as proof of a different and possibly darker timeline. Several theorists in particular think that the Berenstain Bear conspiracy is proof of the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is the brainchild of Fiona Broome, and it pulls its name from when a large group of people all had vivid memories of Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the and it doesn't say it, but in particular, they remember him dying in the 80s, when that happened, when actually he died, just a few years ago. A thing that in this timeline, as they say, never happened. The theory reasons that if there is a large population of people who all share a similar false memory, then the phenomenon is, quote, related to alternate history and parallel realities, end quote. The whole thing makes total sense, right? Like all complex and important issues, you must first understand the history if you want to understand the theory, and what a long and enchanted history the Berenstainites have. The first time someone noticed the Bears' attempt to warn us was back in 2009 on a Dreadlock-dedicated forum. A user by the name of Burke posted in Dreadlock Truth, asking why the pronunciation of his favorite childhood books has changed. In these days, no one grasped the issue at hand and the severity of the Bears' true message. Other users just offered solutions that Berenstain names sounds Jewish, and the change could have been a result of neo-Nazi aggression. The theory, and I'm going to touch back on that Jewish one here in the end. The theory remained dormant for a number of years before it popped up on the humorist website, the Communist Dance Party, in a lengthy 2011 post. Although the words were written in jest, the writer, the false prophet, blows the whole Berenstain Bears theory open and relates it to the butterfly effect, which is another theory. Quote, at some point between the years 1986 and 2011, someone traveled back in time and inadvertently, this is the claim theory, and inadvertently altered the timeline of human history so that the Berenstain Bears somehow became the Berenstain Bears with an A. He wrote, quote, this is why everyone remembers the name incorrectly. It was Berenstain when we were kids, but at some point when we weren't paying attention, someone went back in time and rippled our life experience ever so slightly, end quote. Little did we know how important that notion would come to be in the movement. The next appearance of the theory came in the form of a 2012 post on the blog, The Wood Between Worlds, by a user named Reese, called The Berenstain Bears, We Are Living in Our Own Parallel Universe, end quote. These 1,600 words would prove to be the main literature of this modern movement. It is simply the Berenstainites' New Testament, their Vedas. In it, the blog's author makes a quote-unquote modest proposal, one that implies that all of us are, quote, living in our own parallel universe, end quote. He propagates that there are at least two universes, the Stein universe and the Stain universe. The other attempts to prove the theory as true, and the author attempts to prove the theory is true and breaks down into mathematical and scientific terms. Here's a tidbit. I propose that the universe is a four-dimensional complex manifold. If you don't say habla math jargon, then that means I propose the three space dimensions and the one time dimensions are actually in themselves complex, meaning they take values of the form A plus IB, part real and part imaginary, end quote. From there, the theory gestated until it started appealing last year on a subreddit with the app name Glitch in the Matrix. This is when the gospel began to spread. The subreddit is dedicated to those things that, quote, we usually tell ourselves to forget because they're just too out of step with what experience tells us reality should be like, end quote. The Berenstainites' first major Reddit appearance occurred, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, they get into this whole thing there's a lot more, to the story. And of course, you can go to the show notes for episode 186, to read about it. But bottom line is the guy, the writer of the article for Vice, tried to get in touch, with with one of the authors on it, or, with the company that actually publishes, Random House that published Berenstain Bears Forever. But there is a quote from a guy who said, he believes that, they did get in touch with a scientist of sorts, Dr. Roediger, and said that he's more in line with the idea of Occam's razor than, kind of an X-Files situation where he says, quote, "I'm not sure that misremembering one letter in a long name is a major league false memory," end quote. He wrote to Vice in an email, quote, "My guess is that in this case that Steen is remembered because it is a common ending of many names, Einstein, Frankenstein, Goldstein, etc., or Goldstein, etc." He's obviously a shill in the great Berenstain conspiracy, the author, jokingly writes. But then they did get in touch with Random House here. I'll just finish reading this. "I knew I couldn't believe," this is a story, "the sole expert's account in regards to this notion, as Reddit is never wrong." Tongue-in-cheek. "So I wrote Random House, the publisher of the book since 1962, in an attempt to confirm this theory. In the email, I asked if they had always spelled the name with an A, and if they were certain there were no titles printed under the Berenstain name. Almost immediately after I sent the email, I received a reply from the publishing house. It was supernaturally fast, almost like they knew it was coming. Quote, 'Thank you for contacting the Random House Children's Books Publicity Department,' end quote, they wrote me. Quote, 'Please note that due to the volume of emails we receive daily, it may take some time for us to respond to your request,' end quote. A likely story. They know the Berenstainites are on to them." So, I mean, okay, so fortunately, the article kind of takes it, a bit of a joculant manner, especially towards the end. But a lot of what they're laying out, I mean, is factual to the case. Not saying that factual as in that there's a parallel universe, just, the proposed evidence is stuff that is all linked to, and you can look into it yourself, blah, 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 blah. So what the hell do I even think about this? I know that's what everybody's wondering, okay? And, I'll admit to you, okay, and let me get through the whole thing, okay, before, you say, "Holy shit, what is he talking about?" I remember it being spelled with an E, and that's the incorrect way. Supposedly it's always been an A since the 60s. But I remember it being Berenstain, not Berenstain. So I fall in that camp. Now, with the Mandela effect, there's actually there's a whole term, for what this is. It's confabulation, okay? And there's a bunch of different theories as to what exactly, what causes confabulation. All right, where you have a memory that you're so absolutely sure is accurate, but it ends up, and you can prove it, at least, by our definitions of proof, you can prove that it's not. Okay, like with the Mandela effect itself, with its namesake. People remember Nelson Mandela, dying in the 1980s. He actually just died a few years ago, as of 2016. So, you can prove, right, that they are wrong. That's the claim. And so what caused this confabulation? What caused this issue, to even be, to be a thing? How did this happen? I mean, there's a bunch of different theories. There's the idea, and none of them are necessarily like you have some kind of illness or some kind of disease. Some of them are as simple as that, when you have gaps in your memory, the brain, consciousness needs to fill in those gaps with something. And sometimes those gaps get filled in with bullshit. There's theories as simple as that, as to what causes this. But I have to admit, here's where issues like that, or where simple explanations, Occam's razor explanations come into play here. Because, I mean, my Occam's razor explanation is that, if I were to lay one out, is that, well, I'm Jewish, and I'm ethnically Jewish. So I would have, as a kid particularly, I likely would have filled in, a name with something that is more what I am used to. I would be Berenstain instead of Berenstain because, I'm used to hanging around Goldsteins and all these, other different types, as a kid, because I come from a rather large Jewish family. So, I mean, that's my Occam's razor explanation, but I mean, it really does become a problem. When you start to say, why confabulation occurs, it becomes an issue when a lot of people really do remember Berenstain being spelled with an E and not an A. At that point, it's not just you filling in some memory gap. Like, that means a whole shit ton of people filled in some kind of memory gap. And yeah, people with this, they want to run to the many worlds theory, okay? Which, within quantum physics, I mean, that it's legit, okay? It's not, it's a potential. I shouldn't say it's legit as in it's fact. I'm not saying the many worlds theory is a fact. But this is the many worlds theory is the theory that there are, it's kind of like the show Sliders, if you remember that from the 90s. I really love that show, where, you could go through this, Einstein, Rosenthal, Pulaski bridge. That's the actual name of that. You could go through a wormhole effectively and end up in a parallel universe to where very little things are different. Like maybe Elvis is still alive. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And as an Elvis fan, it actually would be, all these little changes, can occur, and that somehow, with this whole, so with the many worlds theory, there's a lot of fair science. It is a legitimate theory. It is just a theory, but it is a legitimate theory. But then these kind of situations happened, like with the Berenstain Bears or the Berenstain Bears, and suddenly people are saying, oh yeah, this is proof that this is exactly what's going on, and that, at any given moment, we can all kind of end up, at various points within this many worlds theory, we end up in different worlds, but we could have memories of perhaps a previous world. I mean, yeah, if you're going cross-eyed, I understand, okay? Because I don't even necessarily subscribe to the whole many worlds theory. But this one is, I'm going to walk away from this one, from this story, kind of saying, I don't know. Maybe it is just confabulation, but I really do. Like, when I first experienced this, I was shocked to find out that it was Stain. I mean, I haven't looked at one of those books in years, which is part of the problem, I suppose, but I so vividly remember, and I read those books. I can remember the multitude, there's Golden books, with the Sesame Street books and all that. I can remember all the different kids books I had. I had the Tron audiobook that came with the little record, that you could put in a record player. I had the Return of the Jedi books. I had that Ewok book from the Star Wars Ewoks cartoon, where it had all the different textures in it. You could rub Wicket's little fuzzy belly and everything. I remember all of these beautiful books all lined up, and I had tons and tons and tons of the Berenstain Bears, books. And I want to say, that I vividly remember it being spelled with an E. But, I mean, I'm going to go forward with the thought, not that there is some, as far as the Mandela effect, Mandela dying in the 80s, that wasn't even on my radar. If that happened, Nelson Mandela was not on my radar in the 80s. I didn't, learn about him until, later on in school, and he becomes a big deal in Africa, or as a prime minister, president, whatever. So it didn't even cross my radar. So I can't really speak on that one. But, with the Berenstain, yeah, I remember it being spelled with an E. But I am going to go forward in life with the theory, just that as a child, I filled in that word and I just turned it into a Jewish name because when I was a kid, everything was fucking Jewish. So that's how I'm going to go with it. I don't think there was any, I know the article kind of brought that up. I don't think there was any neo-Nazi plot to appease them and to keep them from thinking that everything's controlled by the Jews. And so they changed it from E to A at some point. It seems very clear. Nobody can find any copy of one of these books where it is spelled with an E. But I'm not prepared for the many worlds theory. I don't think that this is proof. And it's a tough issue. I mean, the many worlds theory in and of itself, and a lot of confabulation is in many ways kind of bad science to even bring up, because you can't, good science, you are able to prove or disprove. This one, especially the many worlds theory, you kind of can't. You can't prove it unless somehow you created a Einstein-Rosenthal-Pulaski bridge, which probably isn't going to happen anytime soon. So it's kind of bad science. I mean, I will go forward. In fact, that would be one of the real, interesting ways to maybe get to the bottom of this whole case of the Mandela effect is, what are the age, particularly with the Nelson Mandela case, what are the ages of the people that remember him dying then? And what country did they live in? those, those are interesting, data points to bring up, to see why they would maybe think that Nelson Mandela was dead. Maybe there was some kind of report in certain areas where, where that kind of thing happened. As far as the Berenstain Bears, what percentage of people, and this is tough because there's a lot of people that are just going to want to jump on board with this and just to be different and think it's cool and be able to talk about this kind of wacky shit and to, break away from the reality of their shitty lives, are going to come up and say, oh yeah, no, I'm a Berenstainite or something, even though that's a coined term by the Vice writer. They're going to come out and say that. But I'd be curious, how many of these people are Jewish or grew up in Brooklyn? Even if they're not Jewish, maybe they just grew up in a place where there happen to be more, more Jews than not. So I really personally, bottom line, folks, I don't think there's any conspiracy theory here to be had. I think my own opinion, my own little Occam's razor opinion is it is that simple as in, if there is confabulation, it was just it is my brain filling in a gap based upon the culture that I grew up in. That's really kind of my take on it. But damn, I mean, it does mess with your head, because a lot of people, really do remember. In fact, somebody who I know isn't Jewish, who actually brought this to my attention, but I know she grew up in New York. So you see, that still kind of fits into where, well, you're just filling it in with, based upon the culture that you grew up in, right? Your brain is just filling in the gaps there. So but like I said, though, it is damned strange. I mean, and it really does actually, I mean, I suppose in another way, it really speaks to the fact of just how our brains can rationalize, perhaps the irrational, or, how they can put together something that, you can so easily prove, because it is so easy to prove that they've always been Berenstain Bears. You can buy a book from 1960 whatever, and it'll say Berenstain. You could probably buy a book from the 80s, from 86 or whatever. That was a claim that some time traveler went back there, right? That don't get me into time traveling. But that somebody went back there and changed everything. You can get plenty of books where it says, where the A is there, right? So it's easily, it's easy to disprove that. But then you have people that are just so goddamn certain, that they go forward with that. And it's amazing how the human brain can rationalize and so much, and really, what it can be led to believe. It's no wonder that religion is a thing. It's no wonder that governments are a thing. When people, can honestly run to the idea that because they remember a name having an E in it instead of an A, they think that they are living in some kind of parallel universe. Ooh, boy, human race is fucked. Now, I mean, like I said, it does mess with your head, no question about that. But I think there are some many, very simple answers that don't require you to even go to what are very legitimate theories. Again, they are just theories, like the many worlds theory in quantum physics. But yeah, there you go. Anyway, let's do another story here. I did have for first choice, because I talked about this a few weeks ago, I said that I was going to revisit the subject of enhanced humans. And this is the idea of not AI, but IA, which is intelligence augmentation with humans. And that kind of the theory goes that an IA could be far more dangerous than an AI. Because, with an AI, like kind of the overall theory goes, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit. I just want to give the subject some closure, and then I'm going to move on to another story. The subject, the idea is that with artificial intelligence, at least that you could, at a base level, program some degree of logic, perhaps. And so if it becomes a super intelligence, you don't have to worry about it carrying along perhaps the emotional baggage that a human would have, or the trauma history that a human would have. Of course, here's the problem is that, coding is still done by humans, and you kind of have to wonder, what degree of coding or what degree of machine learning would affect an artificial intelligence based upon the fact that it is all being, all the input it's getting is largely from human beings. So, is that necessarily true? Maybe not so much, because that's the concern, is that an augmented human would have the, again, that emotional baggage or that history of trauma that would cause it to use, this new super intelligence or these new super abilities, to do something very terrible and perhaps wipe out humanity as we know it, or even do, something far, perhaps far worse. And I could imagine some things that are far worse. Like if CERN, or if the Large Hadron Collider actually did open up a black hole and could suck in the entire universe, well, that'd be a terrible thing because there probably is some degree of life elsewhere, albeit not much, in my opinion. So with, this whole concept of enhanced humans, I'm going to boil it down. And I kind of, be it with, with intelligence augmentation or even genetic engineering and all this stuff, I am going to appeal. And this gets actually into, I could get into an interesting side subject, and I just might. I am going to appeal to a movie that has kind of come back into prominence, basically because its sequel came out this year. The movie is Man of Steel. It has to do with Superman. Now, I reviewed Man of Steel on Sovryn Tech a long time ago on this show. I thought it was a great movie. And part of the reason I thought it was great was the first 15 minutes where you see life on Krypton. That was amazing to me, to see Krypton. Not that Krypton hasn't been visited before, even in film, but for it to be so fully realized as being very alien and different, from Earth, I thought was fantastic. I thought that was really well done. And I think a lot of people, there are groups on planet Earth of people that the origin story of Krypton, or the origin story, I should say, of Superman in that movie, they think that there might be some reality to that, but it actually happened on Earth or something to that effect. But that is a completely different side subject, even from the one that I previously mentioned. But in that, you find out, the story kind of goes, is that Jor-El and his wife, they have a child. Of course, they have Superman. They have Kal-El. And this child is born through having sex instead of being born in a gestation tube where he is, where their son is perfectly designed to fill a role in society. This is not just something to do with Man of Steel. There's been episodes of Star Trek. There have been a lot of science fiction books that have covered this subject where, suddenly people become purpose-built to fill a specific role in society. To some degree, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World kind of brings this up. And I think that this, this is where, for me, this whole idea of intelligence augmentation because a lot of people see intelligence augmentation as a self-defense. In fact, Tim O'Reilly did a big, not Bill O'Reilly, Tim O'Reilly did a big write-up about it recently on Medium, where he was saying that intelligence augmentation is what could save us from a malevolent AI. That's assuming AI would be malevolent, of course. And that this is something that needs to happen, and it's going to change everything, and that machine learning, which is what, that's the big hot topic in Silicon Valley right now. Everything's machine learning, which is effectively just saying it's AI plugged into something. Even Kevin Kelly, in his recent book, of Wired fame, who's a guy I more or less like, he's kind of big on the idea that machine learning is going to be like plugging in electricity to everything. It's just going to change everything the way it is. So if humans, through intelligence augmentation, can take advantage of all of this machine learning, then this is going to be, a very good thing. This is going to, to very much change the world, and it would defend from AI itself, which is ironic because machine learning is AI, and this is where all these definitions, get really wild. But my concern with even the notion of intelligence augmentation, not that I'm necessarily against that in the first place, or even just, other various enhancements on humans, be it enhancements in physiological ability and the rest of it. My concern really comes down to, so I want to put this subject to bed. It comes down to central planning, not even just governments, because, and this is something, this is a tact I think I may need to take on more with Sovryn Tech, is that we have more than a problem with governments, okay? I've long felt that religion is far more dangerous than governments because you accept things on faith, as to where at least government sometimes, or at least in many cases, has to try and explain and sort of prove its actions. As to where with religion, you can just say, well, God told me, and you can go and kill somebody, right? Which is crazy. Governments often need a little bit more than that. So the idea that central planning may be the real danger here, more so than governments. The idea in central planning, I think that you could easily call central planning, you could also call it authoritarianism, though authoritarianism goes into other aspects. But the problem here, I think, is central planning. And that's what really scares me with a lot of this, is that there are people who honestly may even call themselves anarchists or voluntarists, who they think they know how things should be. I've talked about this many times. I'm not interested in necessarily telling people how things should be. I am interested in how things can be set up to allow for the most amount of options and choice for a human being, because that, to me, is synonymous with human freedom. That is what's most important, is concentrating on the individual's ability to grow. Now, there are conditions that allow for that, but central planning is one that does not allow for that. Okay, because central planning is really all about either one person or a group of people looking down and telling you this is how things need to be, to allow for this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, central planning is at its heart anti-choice, because it is telling you the way. All right, as to where I think sometimes, the way I talk about something, I may be telling you that this is the way it should be, blah, blah, blah. I mean, yes, there are things that trample on human liberties and all that, and those are, I think those are objectively bad, okay? But largely, I'm just telling you how to allow humans to have the greatest amount of choice. What comes out of that choice may not be necessarily be a good thing. It may not be, but it may not be a bad thing. It comes down to what humans do with their choices and all of this. But that choice needs to be there. So central planning, that's where, this idea of IA, even AI, this idea of, a lot of these different ideas that are all very top down. This is how we're going to set things up, or, we're going to improve, we're going to edit this gene on this person and blah, blah, blah. It really all comes down to a degree of central planning, a central planning of society. And that is very dangerous. Can people choose to be centrally planned upon? Yeah, I suppose they can. They could choose that, but then you've got to be able to have the choice to not, right? So I get concerned about this, because I think, what happens is that, under a central plan, people stop being people. I mean, at the same time, we were just talking about the Mandela effect, Berenstain Bears and the Berenstain Bears, the same human ability that allows people to, that allows for confabulation, that kludginess in the brain, is the same thing that allows us as humans to do these incredible leaps in logic, not leave logic, but just kind of skip ahead. You go, instead of going A, B, C, D, E, you're able to go from A to E. You are able to come up with the very notion of, the computer, of the digital age, of the internet and all this stuff. You are able to just leap from, entire generations of thinking because of this kludginess, because your brain wasn't planned. Because things in your life weren't planned. You were able to put together different pieces of a puzzle, and eventually you didn't need all the pieces, but you figured out the puzzle. So I think it is very limiting when we start, when people start planning from on high, be it through governments or blockchains or whatever else, how people are going to be set up and what the purposes becomes. I think once you start allowing for this, really guaranteed intelligence augmentation, or, adjusting how a person works and all this stuff, eventually you're going to end up to where people say, okay, we need this and so many people that have the superior ability to jump. We need this and so many people with with superior brain abilities and all of this. And so we'll just make sure that this, and you're going to end up with like a quota system. The life on Earth will turn into a gigantic, hierarchical employee system. And that concerns me to no end. The tools themselves, intelligence augmentation, that's fine. Improving your, perhaps your physiological abilities and all this with some kind of genetic engineering. Honestly, in some ways, that's fine. The problem is that when it gets called top down. And right now, we have governments. Right now, we have morons who who don't like governments, or at least governments as we understand them right now, but they still want to tell you how you need to act and how you need to interact. And when you have people like that, I mean, as long as you have the choice to not get involved, great. Okay, then whatever. People do whatever they want. But that's not really the system we're in. We're kind of in a system where, based upon certain things that you do, you could get a gun to your head. That's a problem. So I'm not so much against the idea of enhancing humans in various ways. I'm not against transhumanism. I think a lot of these things could be very wonderful things, very freeing things. Okay, my concern is when the central planners get involved. And I think they're already involved, to put a stop to this. And I think the scare tactics are already, getting laid out. Like people saying, well, artificial intelligence is going to come after you, so we better improve the human species, otherwise we're fucked, blah, blah, blah. Artificial intelligence is becoming somewhat of a boogeyman. And I'm not saying that all those claims are invalid. There are genuine concerns with artificial intelligence. But let's be careful to where somebody on high wants to say humans need to do this, this, and this to avoid this new boogeyman. Let's watch out for that. And that's the bottom line that I wanted to bring up with the whole enhanced human thing. Some people sent me some emails, just kind of more or less saying that, well, this could be a tremendous boon. This could be a very good thing. People could improve themselves. And yeah, I'm totally on board with self-improvement. All the way. So much of Sovryn Tech is based around that. I think that's wonderful. But it becomes, I get, again, it's when the central planners, when the authoritarians, get involved, that it becomes, a real issue. And honestly, authoritarians and people might find this to be a controversial thing for me to say, but what else is new? Even parents, I have a problem when parents start calling shots, for their children. Well, edit this on him, edit this on him, edit this on him. What happened to the individual having the choice? And your baby is an individual, and has just as much quote unquote right to choices in their lives as you do. Do you get to set them up for that? Some of these are very deep questions that I wouldn't begin to pretend to know the answers to. Okay, I'm happy to have conversations about them, but that's how far I think we need to think about this when these technologies start to become more prevalent. Intelligence augmentation, genetic augmentation, and all this different stuff. We need to really, people need to be talking about this, and it needs to get hammered out. And it's okay to disagree, folks. You don't have to get at each other's throats for disagreeing about things. But anyway, that's enough on that subject. Let's get into. I want to get into a little bit of game talk here, and then how far in are we? Woo! Hour and 30. All right. I might skip. So I was going to do HackSec, but for HackSec, I was just going to do a review of the movie 0 Days. I think I'll save that for another week. And if you haven't checked it out, there is a 2016 documentary, 0 Days. I totally recommend watching it. Whatever it takes to watch it. Of course, you can't use Kick-Ass Torrents right now. And by the way, that just a quick update on that. Kick-Ass Torrents is still down. Like I said last week, I'm very concerned that it'll never come back. And in fact, even some of the mirrors, even some of the ones that I recommended already, like kickasstorrents.website was the mirror for the Kick-Ass Torrents forums. Well, not just forums, but a website that I was recommending people check out. That is now taken down as well. This is... I have not seen anything quite like this in the piracy community, as it were. This level of a takedown. This is a, it's problematic. It's bullshit. And break it down to its barest levels. Torrenting is just sharing. And as I say at the end of this show, or as the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy says in the end music of the show, this show is copy heart because sharing is an act of love and love is not subject to law. Torrenting is an act of sharing. Torrenting is an act of love. Torrenting should not be subject to law. Nothing should be subject to law, but you get my point. So, this is really, really, wide scale what's going on here. Kick-Ass Torrents looks like it's just not going to come back. If it does, I will be the first one to tell you, about it. So you won't be able to get your hands on 0 Days through that, unfortunately. I'm pretty sure you could find it on the Pirate Bay. I recommend you do so. And also, I will point out, to listeners that demonoid.pw This is Demonoid came back maybe a year, maybe 2 years ago, and it seems like a lot of uploaders, a lot of content providers, I should say, have moved to Demonoid. Like one thing I was really concerned about was my ability to download comic books. Not to say I wouldn't pay for comic books, but for me to be able to own them digitally, you have to torrent. Or you have to, pull some kind of trick with Kindle or whatever. But I mean, giving Amazon more money, come on. So this is the way to do it. And I noticed that to get comic books, Demonoid.pw was really the way to go. And I mean, I used to use Demonoid. That was my top one a long time ago, but that got shut down. But it is back. It does seem to be working quite a bit. And there's a lot of cover your ass language on the website. You don't have to log into the website. You don't have to be a member to be able to use it. So do check that out if you want to find some of the stuff. It's not as good as Kick-Ass Torrents was. Make no mistake. I use it for very varying purposes. But I just want to let people know that is out there, and that's the update on the story. Is that Kick-Ass Torrents is still down and out. I know that Artem Volin, who is the alleged founder of Kick-Ass Torrents and who was arrested by the U.S. government, through Polish policemen, effectively, it's that he's getting a great legal team, as I understand it, which hopefully that works out. But free Volin, man, not free ballin', but free Volin, seriously. I don't know what he's done in his life otherwise, but if he is the founder of Kick-Ass Torrents, he is an absolute hero and has, enabled a lot of happiness and a lot of personal growth through what he created, if he did. So, definitely something I'll be keeping an eye on and letting you know more about. Speaking of another story that I've been keeping an eye on, I wanted to mention this earlier and I didn't think to get to it. Another story that I've been following for months, actually to be going on a year here soon enough, is the case where, was it the Pittsburgh Police Department? I believe it was or maybe it was Philadelphia, was covering, either way, police departments in Pennsylvania. They were using Google Maps stickers that they made themselves on their various law enforcement vehicles and ones that were like reading license plates and all that for the purposes of law enforcement, blah, blah, blah. I said at that time when that story broke, because that's crazy that they're doing that. Like that is such a, bold-faced lie on the part of the police department. What a shock. That if Google does not, because they were making their cars look like they were Google Maps cars, that they were Google, that they were looking for Google Maps and all that stuff. This is a severe breach of privacy in many ways on the part of the police department. And I said that if Google or /Alphabet, right, that's the parent company, if they did anything less than sue the shit out of those Pennsylvania police departments, that you might as well just say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Alphabet /Google is an arm of the state. To date, there has been no lawsuit filed. To date, there has been no action, no clarification. There has been no response from Alphabet /Google about this whole situation. So, folks, my point still stands. Google is an arm of the state. You are supporting the state when you support them. If you are a fanboy of them, you're rah-rah, go government. They should have done something about this, and they haven't. They haven't done a goddamn thing. I mean, this was an egregious story. So anyway, we've covered that before. I got that out there. There it is. Let's get into a little bit of game talk here. I want to talk about this. So the interesting thing that came out was the mini NES. We talked about it briefly a couple episodes ago. The mini NES is a device coming out in November of 2016. It's going to sell for $60. I think it has 30 some odd games on it. It is officially being released by Nintendo. Of course, NES means Nintendo Entertainment System, and it is a literal NES minus the cartridge slot. The games are already baked in. That is the size of your hand, of the average hand. I think that this is really cool. Let's be clear. This thing does not connect to the internet. Kudos. It doesn't have it. It uses some degree of USB power, but it doesn't really have a USB port. there's no cameras on it. There's nothing. It's just a little box that plays some games. Awesome. I have wanted this sort of system for so long. And I mean it, like for such a long time. This is, there was the case that we covered at various points on Sovryn Tech of, what was it, the retro... Oh shit! Now I can't remember the name of it, but there was that it was a system where they were going. Or yeah, it was the RGS, the retro gaming system. I think that's all it was called, or the RVG, the RVGS, something like that. But the company had bought the molds for the plastic molds for the Jaguar, for the Atari Jaguar, and they were going to make. In fact, Coleco got involved, and they were going to call it the new ColecoVision. Right, if you remember that. And then it ended up all being a scam. They had just kind of slipped a Super Nintendo into this system and, into a Jaguar body. And that's what they were showing off at these various toy shows. And it was all bullshit. And now, that dream is kind of dead. But I love the dream that you would have a new system that could play, new classically styled games, didn't connect to the internet or anything. And maybe the system could, last you for decades like game systems used to. And, that didn't end up coming to fruition. But really, the Mini NES is kind of a step in the right direction for that, I think. Of course, it doesn't have the cartridge slot, but it has some other things going for it, and I want to break into that. I think that this is something I talked about in the Game Talk a little while back, that I think this is sort of a direction things are going, to where, even though it's kind of roundabout, to where I think that games are not going to, eventually, they're not even going to be, I don't even think they're going to be sold digitally. What's going to, because right now that's the big thing, right, is you do digital downloads and all this. And even for Nintendo, that's a thing where, the Nintendo 3DS, you have the e-store that you can grab stuff from and all that. I think what's going to happen in the future, and I applaud this, I don't have a problem with it. I think games are going to be so massive, and this is already happening. I mean, you think how many games, League of Legends, the upcoming No Man's Sky, which is coming out in a few days, a lot of these, or Dota 2, Overwatch, all these different games, even Pokemon Go could really, could work with this. To where a lot of these games are so, like, you couldn't play any other game. Like, why play any other games? These games are so all-inclusive. These games are so huge. They're so massive. They're so long. In fact, like in the case of No Man's Sky and some others, they never end. So I can imagine to where you don't buy consoles anymore. You don't even really buy, like, gaming PCs anymore. I mean, there will always be people that buy that sort of thing, of course. But what's going to happen is that I think people are just going to buy a piece of hardware. And the game is going to be tailor-made for that hardware. And this is a great thing, because that would solve, kind of like last week I was talking about, one of the major problems with Pokemon Go. Again, it doesn't mean the game is bad. I'm just saying that it runs into the issue. It's not the game's fault. It runs into the issue of, with Android, with iOS, this isn't even a problem for Pokemon Go. But with Android, you have so much different hardware out there. You can't, not everybody can take advantage of everything within the game. So how do you solve that? Well, you solve that by, one of the ways you can solve that is by selling the system with the game. The system and the game are one thing. You buy one piece of hardware that does it all, or maybe you just have to connect it to a TV. Now, the Mini NES is kind of that deal, to where it doesn't connect to anything. Hell, there isn't even updates, which is, I mean, what could you update? But I think that's great. It's just, it's a purpose-built, it does one thing, and it's probably going to do it really fucking well. Okay. And also, I love the fact that the Mini NES, again, doesn't have any sensors, doesn't really have any ports, other than, being able to connect controllers and all this stuff. That I think that's a damn wonderful thing. Please give me entertainment devices or, electronic devices that don't connect to the internet. What a fucking dream. I am serious. Oh, that's so exciting. It's the anti-internet of things. How could you not want that? But, speaking of that real quick, boy, there was a hell of a story that came out this week, that there was a company that sold for like $150. They sold this auto feeder, pet, auto feeder for pets. And the company's server went down. And so a person's cat died while they were away because the system didn't auto feed the cat. That's the Internet of Things for you, folks. When really all it needs is a goddamn timer. It doesn't need to connect to the internet for anything. It's just, fucking shit. Anyway, so the mini NES is great because it leads in a few different directions. One is it leads away from the Internet of Things. I like that. But also it gets to that point to where, when you buy the system, you're buying the game at the same time. Now, ironically, this is history repeating itself. In fact, one of the first game systems I remember, before even the Atari 2600 that I still have, I remember, or that still functions, I should say, I remember having a Pong system. And all the system did was a little brown box. You hooked up a couple controllers to it, okay, and it connected to the television. And you could, there's little switches on it that you could flick to play different versions of Pong. But bottom line, you bought this, all you played was Pong. That's it. It was one and done, okay? Or it's like buying those, Tiger Electronic systems to where you bought, it's like $15. You bought one of them, and all you could play was that one game that you bought, but you had it all in one package. Yeah, in fact, in those packages, you literally had everything you wanted in one package. So I think that's an interesting, kind of concept to run with. I could really see that being, very much being kind of the future of gaming is this style, with the mini NES. And, this is going to have, there's going to be tons of these things. That's one point I want to bring up to you. I have another one I want to get to. There's probably going to be, based upon reactions to the mini NES, there's going to be a mini Super Nintendo, a mini SNES. There's going to be probably a mini Nintendo 64, which I can't wait for that. That's going to be great. Where it's just this hardware that gets sold that has a few games on it, works with peripherals and all that, doesn't connect to anything, and and moves on. And then there will probably be second versions. There'll be a mini NES 2 that maybe that'll have 100 games on it instead of 30. The 30 games that are on the mini NES, you have all the Zeldas, you have all, a lot of the Marios, you have Kirby, my personal favorite. You have a bunch of these different, just classic titles. You have Metroid on there and all that shit. That's enough. There's playing on there for a good long while. Because I remember how long I played the NES, and I didn't even have that many games back in the day. It's going to be a thing. There's going to be more of these. There's going to be sequels probably, because I think the pre-sales, the mini NES is already on pre-order, and I think the sales are already through the roof. $60, come on. For a whole system with some of the greatest games ever made. Even, you can buy those games, those specific games for the Nintendo. You could buy them either for previous Nintendo systems like the Game Boy Advance when they did their classic NES series, or you could buy it with the 3DS and all that stuff. Buying those 30 games alone would likely have cost you, anywhere from, $100 to $300 anyway. So you're getting a deal, frankly. Buying it in this fashion. So it just makes sense, to have them that way. But I could see this, I could really see this becoming a thing. Now, there was a story where a company was, they're claiming, and this is for, of course, this year is the 25th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog. Woohoo! In fact, there's new Sonic games coming out. I am excited about all of it. I think it all looks great. I love the new Sonic games. A lot of people don't like them. I still enjoyed them. And in fact, now they're talking about they're going to make it's called Sonic Mania, and it's supposed to be the spiritual sequel to Sonic 3. What's weird, and this is weird because even in, gaming news sites and all that, and in gaming journalism in general, did everybody forget about Sonic 4? Because that came out and it was the same verbiage around, or, the same marketing tack around Sonic Mania, to where they're saying, we're going back to 2D gaming and all this, and we're going to, granted, they didn't go all the way back to 16-bit, which Sonic Mania is doing, but I thought both episodes of Sonic 4 was fantastic. They were both fantastic. So I don't, whatever. I don't get it. I guess I'm a special boy. But anyway, there's a company out of China that is claiming that they are making the mini Genesis now, or the mini Mega Drive, depending what part of the world you're in. Because the Sega Genesis was called Mega Drive in the rest of the world. And this is not true. While it has Sega's branding, because Sega, franchises out its name, the mini Genesis is really piss poor hardware, and it's actually hardware that's been around for a while. Granted, the mini Genesis that is being offered can actually play Genesis cartridges, and it has some pre-installed games. I think it has 100 games, but a bunch of those are actually bullshit games. They're not legit. it's not really affiliated with Sega. And believe me, I wish Sega would do this. I wish they would come out with with another system. I wish they would do something like the Mini NES, but where it's really them. They're selling that really high quality, Genesis controller and all that. And other people, actually, Sovereign Tech listeners, one in particular I can think of, she really wanted, I remember, she's like, oh, I hope Sega does something like this. Well, as it stands, they're not, despite the fact that a lot of news sites were reporting that, yes, they were. No, what if you buy that Mini Genesis that's coming out, or that Mini Mega Drive, it is just stick with an emulator, or buy the Genesis games on Steam or something. At least that was officially done through Sega. Do not grab this system. And there have been others in the past. I mean, this isn't, what Nintendo's doing also isn't new. Like there's been popular Atari re-releases where there'd be like 80 games on it and all that. And most of those are fine too. But again, none of them hold the kind of the same weight or the same nostalgia, or the kind of the same. I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, but they just don't carry they don't bring with them the fan base that really Nintendo has. So that's why the Mini NES is such a big deal. It's not really revolutionary. It is revolutionary for the times, I think, in what it does. But it's not necessarily a new idea by any means. So I'm excited for it. I think it's really cool. I love the fact that it doesn't connect to the internet. I think that's a huge boon. I know some people are going to say, "Oh, but what if it could? We could install old, we could buy through an e-store. We could buy new games, online and all that stuff." No, you know what? No, enjoy the games that are there. Like to some degree, my Steam library is over. I'm pretty sure it's over 1,000 games now. No exaggeration. And as a game developer, I'm shooting myself in the foot, proverbially, I suppose, because, I'm saying don't bother with the new games when I'd love for you to buy my games, which I have 2 out already, by the way. If you didn't know, just go to zog.ninja to find those. But, people there's so many games out there now. Like nobody really takes the time to get into the nitty gritty of a lot of these games. And there, even these NES games that are available, like there's some real depth and some real fun. Like they're still finding to this day. I know, and this isn't one that's on. There's Donkey Kong games on the Mini NES, but not this one because it's a Super Nintendo game. But they're still finding secrets that were inside of Donkey Kong Country. That game came out 20 years ago. Longer. They're almost 30 years ago. I really wish, I know as a creator. And as a game developer, I know how much shit gets put into things. And there's a vindication, there's a fun when you find out, however you find it out, that, either consumers, game players, whatever, find hidden gems or figure something out that you put in the game, like little Easter eggs and all that are a lot of fun. I love looking for that stuff in games. I still play a lot of the classic games. I mean, that's largely what I play. I still play new stuff too here and there. But anyway, I really don't think it hurts anything, and I sure as hell don't think it's going to hurt sales by not having, by Nintendo selling a game system that's not connected to the internet. I don't. So I like this path. And there are going to be multiple paths. I mean, there's multiple different, this is kind of like we were talking about last week in episode 185, with Pokemon Go. That's not the Pokemon game for everybody. Fine. Then over here, make the Pokemon games for the other kind of Pokemon game players, for the other Pokemon fans. Just like with this, there's different, gaming is such a broad thing. There's all different types of gamers, and you can sell various things to those people. So I like this direction. However, I do still think, I just want to say that I think this is kind of proof of what's coming, to where a lot of games, we are going to get back to the point to where a lot of people are really only playing 1 or 2 games. And they're going to become experts at those games. I mean, people are going to play games that are only a couple hours long. Like I make my games short because you don't need to be playing it for a year. I know what most people are going to spend all their time on when playing a game, and it's something that has a lot more competitiveness and all this different stuff. So I like to make short games that one and done, and you enjoyed the experience and enjoyed the story. But I do think that, we're getting to the point to where people, League of Legends is going to sell its own console effectively. And all it does is play League of Legends. And that's fine. I think that's a great idea. I think that now maybe people won't want to carry around another device with them, but I think, selling a Pokemon Go thing, that just did Pokemon Go would be very interesting. In fact, now they're already talking about that the Nintendo NX, there's been some rumors about that, and I'm going to switch gears here. We're going to get into the Climax in just a second. The Nintendo NX is going to be what I had hoped it would be, is that it will be a portable, hybrid. It's going to be a hybrid system to where it can plug in when you're at home, it can plug into your TV, or you can pick it up and carry it away. Now, they're already saying that there's rumors that you're going to be able to play any of the mobile efforts by Nintendo and Nintendo properties, because, again, Pokemon Go is not actually a Nintendo game. That you're going to be able to play those on the Nintendo NX. I think that's a great idea. That's a huge idea. And it also, that confirms some previous statements that were made a couple of years ago when the NX was first announced. There was the rumor that it was going to be Android-based. Well, if it's going to play Miitomo, if it's going to play the new Fire Emblem and the new Animal Crossing game, all of which are coming out for mobile, for Android or iOS, and if it's going to play Pokemon Go, it's probably going to have to be Android-based in some form or fashion. So all that's great news. I'm really excited. I'm shocked that people think the Nintendo NX is a bad idea, based upon the rumors that they've heard. I think it's a great goddamn idea. It's going to solve so many problems in gaming, in my opinion, or at least in mobile gaming. I think it's wonderful. All right, enough of that. Enough talking about the mini NES and just kind of where I guess I see the future of gaming going. I wanted to kind of drive those points home. I'm going to shift gears and I'm going to give you one spoiler alert, okay, because I want to talk about, in the last few minutes we've got here, I am going to talk about Star Trek Beyond. Okay, I told you I'd do a bit of a review of this. I might do a more in-depth review for Patreon content. But right here, I'm going to give you one. I'm going to tell you what I thought of the movie and get into some stuff. But again, you got your one spoiler alert because I'm not going to hold back. Okay, people that make me hold back on what I can say, I consider you terrorists against free speech. So Star Trek Beyond, I'll just outright, and Stephanie and I talked about it briefly on Sex and Science Hour last night too. I will say, I thought it was great. As far as where I would rank it in all Star Trek movies, it'd be higher up there. It would definitely be, higher up. I don't think, it's tough to say if I would rank it better than any of the, of the movies in the Prime timeline, which, if you don't know what this is, okay, you have, the past 3 Star Trek films that have come out, the ones produced or directed even by J.J. Abrams, even though Star Trek Beyond was directed by Justin Lin, who he did a great job. They have all taken place in a kind of an alternate universe. We're talking about alternate universes in here, and this is, Star Trek Beyond is in the Berenstain Bears, and, all the Next Generation and the previous classic Star Trek movies are in the Berenstain Bears universe, right? And so, I don't know that this would, and the difference here, the Next Generation and the classic movies, those took place in what's called the Prime timeline or the Prime universe. The past 3 movies, the J.J. Abrams movies, they used to call it the Abrams-verse. Now they officially call it the Kelvin timeline, okay, or the Kelvin universe. I don't know if I'd rank it higher than any of the Prime timeline movies, even Star Trek 5 and 1. I actually love both. Star Trek 1 is my favorite movie of all time, or Star Trek the Motion Picture is my favorite movie, favorite Star Trek movie of all time. I don't know if I'd even rank it higher than 5, but there's I kind of gave something away there by mentioning Star Trek 5. But this, as far as the Kelvin timeline movies, it is the best one. It is better than Into Darkness. It is better than the 2009 Star Trek, or was it 2011? Yeah, 2009, I think. It was fantastic. It was so fucking good. I cannot recommend this movie enough to go see it. It had it all, there's no real. I didn't see any flaws in the effects. I didn't see any issues There weren't any acting issues by any means. I mean, some people, like I did the Independence Day Resurgence review, and one of the issues was, the acting at certain points was lackluster. But the acting in this was great, and the direction was great. Justin Lin, he's known for doing the more recent Fast and the Furious films, which I love those. Well, I love all those movies, but kind of my great guilty pleasure. But he did a fantastic job with this, I think, and I think I could see his style, and I liked it more than I like J.J. Abrams' style, which that's not a shock. But just a very, very enjoyable film, and it felt. So here's the interesting thing with this. Before I perchance I get into any of the story, a lot of people complained about Star Trek Beyond because there was this odd back and forth. So a lot of people liked it, and including, quote unquote professional reviewers liked it because they said it felt like classic Star Trek. It was the first, it was, not that a lot of people really like the action oriented versions of these movies, or that these three films have been. Oh, sorry. These past three films have been. And I don't mind it either that they're more action-oriented than they are perhaps intellectual, even though I still think they have aspects of that. But a lot of people said, this one is where it felt more like classic Star Trek, and it felt more like a Star Trek episode. And I agree with those, with all those sentiments. It did feel like a Star Trek episode, which I think is a good thing. Now, here's what some people here's the retort to some of that. Okay, because there's people that are just going to hate these films for whatever reason that they hate them, and I get annoyed by that. Well, I feel that way about certain franchises. Like, I hate the new Battlestar Galactica, but I love the old one. But anyway, the complaint was, it's like, so back in the day, and I remember this, so I understand where these, some of the, this opposite spectrum of professional viewers or reviewers are coming from. Back in, this would have been 1999 or 98 when Star Trek Insurrection came out, which I really liked that movie. People complained at that time that it felt like a Star Trek episode. It was a great episode of The Next Generation, but it wasn't a great movie. And so they complained about it. So now what's happening with Star Trek Beyond is there are reviewers saying, wait a second, didn't people complain about Star Trek Insurrection because it felt like an episode and that was a bad thing? But now, since Star Trek Beyond feels like a Star Trek episode, they're saying that it's a good thing? Like, isn't that an inconsistency? I agree that at face value, that's an inconsistency. Okay, but first off, I didn't dislike Insurrection. I thought it was great that it felt like a Star Trek episode. But here's where I think the difference lies in, that people maybe unconsciously aren't understanding. The reason that a lot of people didn't like Insurrection because it felt like a Star Trek episode was because at the time, there was tons of Star Trek on TV. You had Deep Space Nine and you had Voyager. I mean, there was so much Star Trek out there, that you really needed for a movie needed to be a cut above in most people's mind. It couldn't just be a great episode. It needed to be more to justify paying money to see Star Trek, because otherwise you could just go watch DS9 and Voyager, right? Today, that's not the case. We've got the new, Star Trek Discovery series coming out in January 2017. But today, any Star Trek is quote unquote, a blessing, right? So people don't mind that it felt like an episode because you're just so... there's such a dearth of Star Trek right now, you'll take what you can get, and if it feels like a classic thing, all the better. So I don't think there's an inconsistency. I just think people are missing why Insurrection feeling like an episode wasn't enough for it to be considered a great movie, and as to why Beyond is considered great because of that. So there's that. I get it. I understand, value subjective, whatever, okay? All of this obviously is my opinion on Star Trek, and I know many times my opinions on entertainment, can be very unique. So, but I really enjoyed this. I loved the fact that there were. Here's the second thing that I loved about this whole movie, and the whole movie is around like trying to find this ancient super weapon that can kill. Or that can wipe out biological organisms while at the same time saving all the technology and all this stuff. At least that's kind of the gist that I got of it. That's sort of the thrust. And the Enterprise gets tricked into kind of a rescue mission, and then it ends up all about getting this weapon from them, and blah 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 blah. That's kind of the storyline. And again, the storyline isn't mundane, but it's not as the execution of everything that happens, the execution of the action, of the of the lines, of all that stuff. That's what made this such a really great movie. But what I really liked about it is I felt like this movie, Star Trek Beyond, was so vindicating for Enterprise, for the show Enterprise, as in the show with Captain Archer, Scott Bakula there, and all the rest, which I love that show. It's not my favorite Star Trek show. My favorite Star Trek show is Voyager, hands down. Like that, it's not even hard for me to think about. Not to say now, my favorite Star Trek character is Captain Kirk, like, and not this new Captain Kirk either. Even though Chris Pine's doing all right, he's the captain now. But anyway, it was so vindicating. Actually, this whole series of films, these past 3 films, have been so vindicating for Enterprise because there's always been little hints of it. Like in the 2009 Star Trek movie, you had they mentioned Admiral Archer and his dog, which is a reference to Porthos, or one of Porthos' descendants, which was Captain Archer's beagle in the show Enterprise. In Star Trek Into Darkness, there's a point where in the Admiral's office you see, or in a Admiral's office, Admiral Marcus particularly, you see like a lineup of ships, of various ships through Starfleet history, and one of them is the NX class, is in the NX-01 that the original Enterprise was, from the show Enterprise, not the original series of Star Trek. So that was cool. And then in this one they mentioned the Xindi War, they mentioned the Romulan War, they mentioned the Makos, which was like the military arm of United Earth back in the Star Trek Enterprise days. All that was great. Because you got to understand that Star Trek Enterprise was supposed to be the next big franchise of Star Trek. Okay, there was supposed to be the franchise within the franchise. There were supposed to be Star Trek Enterprise movies. There was supposed to be all this wild stuff. They were supposed to be the next big thing. They were going to save the Star Trek franchise in its entirety, and that wasn't allowed to happen. So sadly, because the show, I thought it was really good all the way around, but the 4th season was definitely knocking it out of the park when they gave Manny Cotto the controls. That was really great. But anyway, so it's so nice to see Enterprise getting vindicated by it, in many ways, still being what ended up creating these movies. Because the plot, the major plot twist in Star Trek Beyond is directly related to Star Trek Enterprise. It has to do with that. And in fact, and then they bring on, and you've seen this in the trailers, so I can't believe this would be a spoiler for anybody, not that I care. You see this older ship that they're flying around in, and this is really cool. This in many ways made the movie for me. You had the USS Franklin, which was a ship that was in its Starship class, and supposedly it was the first Warp 4 vessel. As to where the NX-01, the show of Star Trek Enterprise, was the first Warp 5 vessel, this is the first Warp 4 vessel. And I thought that was so cool that they found it and they end up using it, and it kind of saves the day. I love it when that kind of shit happens. When you take like this really old technology and it ends up beating the crap out of the advanced one. Like I think that, that kind of abstract idea is so cool. I live for that sort of stuff. So I really, really dug that. And so that had a nice appeal, and it looked, admittedly, I would have rather find out, because when you watch the trailers, you saw that ship, and I think I even talked about it on Sovereign Tech in the past, where I said it's like, that looks so much like the NX-01, maybe that'll be the original Enterprise or something, or, maybe that'll be some NX class ship laying around, and that would have been cool if it was. But it's just as well that they didn't do it for a couple of reasons. One is that in the sequel books to Star Trek Enterprise, they kind of did. Simon & Schuster did the big relaunches where they're trying to create this sort of unified universe that happens after Star Trek Voyager, or that happens after various successive shows. The books that take place like in the Romulan War for Star Trek Enterprise, you find out that the NX class gets a huge refit. In fact, I even think they call it Columbia class. Like it's a whole new thing where they get the secondary hull like you're used to with starships in Starfleet in general, or in Star Trek in general. And so the idea of it not being the NX-01 is great, because that still allows the Simon & Schuster Star Trek Enterprise novels to be, to where you could treat them as canon, where you could treat them as, okay, these things happened. So that was really cool. So creating the Franklin, I thought was a fine idea. Some people thought it was crazy that, the it being the first Warp 4 vessel kind of took away from the achievement of the Enterprise being the first Warp 5 vessel? I don't think so, because Warp 4 and Warp 5, I mean, they are night and day in differences in speed. So that's still quite the achievement. And there's no reason, again, the running theory right now is that the Franklin was a vessel, wasn't a Starfleet vessel, but it was a Mako vessel. Like, it was one of these different organizations. Because you have 3 different organizations in Star Trek kind of prehistory. You have USPA, the United Earth Space Probe Agency. You have Mako, and then you have Starfleet itself. Okay, so for each one to kind of have their own developments and all that, I think that's kind of cool. And I think also, because another thing that people complained about with the Franklin, again, you just had these purist assholes out there. Another thing that they complained about was that the Franklin, the engine design doesn't look like the engine design of the Prime, the Prime timeline, the Prime universe and all this, right? I don't think that's a problem. In fact, if anything, it kind of helps explain, like, you could say that after the incident with the USS Kelvin in the 2009 Star Trek, you could say that they went, because of, this military incursion that happens against the USS Kelvin, by Nero with his, Romulan/Borg ship, or, his whatever, that Starfleet decides to go a little more military, so maybe they went with more Mako designed ships, and that's why the engines on the Enterprise, the 1701 Enterprise of the Kelvin timeline, looks like the engines of Mako, because they went with Mako. They went back to the drawing board, and maybe they started implementing more Mako designs. I mean, there's so many cool ways to explain this. And look, folks, even if you're a Prime timeline purist and you only want to deal with things in the Prime timeline, you end up with another ship out of this. You end up with more stories that matter, because a lot of the stuff that is relevant to Star Trek Beyond directly comes from the timeline and the universe of Star Trek Enterprise. So I just think all that stuff is so cool. All the Easter eggs were so cool. Now I'm going to really get into the spoiler of it. There is a point, because Leonard Nimoy very sadly died. Really, I guess I think it was while this movie was in production, and they addressed that is a part of the story. And as you know, the Prime timeline Spock exists in the Kelvin timeline. And Spock, he leaves, the Prime timeline Spock, Leonard Nimoy Spock, leaves effects for Zachary Quinto's Spock, for the younger Spock. And I'll tell you something. I mentioned this on Sex and Science Hour last night. I cried during this movie, and when I cried was at the end of the film. This is, I don't think it would affect most of my listeners as much as it affected me. So I don't mind telling you about it. But there's a point where he's going through the effects of the Prime timeline Spock, of the older Spock. And he opens up this picture, and it's a picture of the original cast. Nichelle Nichols playing Uhura, James Doohan as Scotty, DeForest Kelley is Dr. McCoy and all this. And of course, William Shatner as Kirk. It's a promo picture from Star Trek V of the crew. It looks like a shot taken from the bridge and everything. Very happy. Oh man, was that? I mean, I have goosebumps right now. That hit me when he sees that picture of the original crew, original actors, and all that. That was perfect. And it so hits on what's so great about these movies in the Kelvin timeline, about these past 3 films, because they respect what came before. That's the real problem, is that most remakes today, I mean, you're going to do remakes. Remakes, I guess you could say, are reboots are a fact of life and all this, right? But when you respect that, when you respect what came before, and you really respect it, like no other franchise has done what Star Trek has done as far as respecting that past. That makes me feel good about it, and that makes me far more accepting of what you're doing, of the work that you're doing now, the new work and the new actors and all that. It makes it very easy to internalize them and to enjoy them, because everything that you internalized in the past, William Shatner as Kirk and all this stuff, is still legit. I mean, and it can, yes, it's your own choice. You can make it as legit as you want, whatever, fine. Okay. But in the canon as it stands, it's still there. And I thought that was great. I mean, they just hit it out of the park, with putting that in there. I thought it was awesome. So, and then of course, now because the Enterprise does get destroyed in this, just like in the original Star Trek 3, the Enterprise is destroyed. You do get the NCC 1701A at the end of this, and I think that's cool. And as far as we know, there's already going to be a fourth film. I think that's very exciting that there's going to be a fourth film, and even though apparently Star Trek Beyond isn't exactly doing blockbuster numbers per se, I think it's worth their time to keep going and do a Star Trek 4. I mean that and that's okay. Like I don't know when this changed, but back in the day, the Star Trek movies were in rough shape, and like Star Trek 4 was this massive hit, back in '87. Star Trek 5 was not a massive hit, even though I still enjoy it. But Star Trek 4 made enough money to where they said, okay, yeah, 5 didn't really do it, but let's go ahead and make Star Trek 6. And then Star Trek 6 ended up being great. Now, I think Star Trek Beyond is great. I think it's objectively great. I think Star Trek, I think Into Darkness and as well as the 2009 Star Trek really both did enough money that even if Beyond doesn't really, do gangbusters, I think enough money has still been made to where there's enough faith in the franchise, and bringing on Chris Hemsworth is supposed to come back, which he was in the first, in the 2009 Star Trek, played Kirk's dad. How they're going to work that out, I don't know, but it's cool. I think they still have, they've done enough money to where they can say, yeah, we can take the risk on making a new Star Trek 4, on making a sequel to Star Trek Beyond, which is great. So I could go on and on about this. The movie there was a lot of cues in it. Not just with like the movie posters either, where there was that rainbow poster from Star Trek the Motion Picture. They just put in the new characters. There was a lot in this film that felt like Star Trek the Motion Picture. Like I had said in our little mini review we did on Sex and Science Hour last night, the first 20 minutes were amazing. Were so good because you got to see the Yorktown station. And it was just beautiful. All these beauty shots. And that was what I loved about Star Trek the Motion Picture, was you got a fully realized future. You got to see the nitty-gritty, and all the depths and all the grandeur of what life is like in the 22nd century. You got this again in this film, and I thought that was really nice. I really enjoyed seeing that. There was also some stylistic cues, I think, that were there. I love the new uniforms. All the new uniforms that they showed off in this I thought were great. Fortunately, they stuck with the short skirts. My favorite Star Trek uniforms, hands down, for very obvious reasons. I mean, they are sexy as hell. Not as sexy as still suits. I got to say, in science fiction in general, the sexiest outfits or uniforms or whatever, I think are the still suits from Dune. I love those. Pure heat. Okay, but second runner up are definitely the original series uniforms. From Star Trek. With the short skirts and all that, and even what the guys wore, I thought were great. So whenever I have a Star Trek uniform on, generally that's what I wear, and I own some. So anyway, this was fantastic. It hit all the right cues for fans, in my opinion. It's all right there. There's so many wonderful theories. There's so much to talk about with the movie that go beyond, no pun intended, that go beyond what you saw on the screen. And there's some great quotes. There was a great quote by Kirk in it. Where he says, because the main enemy is this kind of soldier stereotype character that I played by Idris Elba that I wish we got to know more of. But there's this point where he says to him, better, something to the effect of, better to die saving lives than to live to take lives. And that just, me personally, and longtime listeners to Sovereign Tech can understand why that hit me. That cut me right to the quick. I was like, yeah, fucking right, man. And to be able to quote Captain Kirk like that, because I'll quote that line forever. I thought that was just so heavy and perfect. That was good. So there was a bit of a moral there. Some of the moral plays are a little bit questionable. There was definitely kind of an anti-veteran, aesthetic there. I think that some people could play on. I won't go more into that, but I just want to mention that it's there. They were a bit heavy-handed with the whole concept of unity, which. Oh man, I could talk another 5 minutes about that, but I don't want to go into that depth. Maybe I'll get into that on a Patreon episode. I'll talk about the concept of unity, working together, and all this stuff, because I take issue with that whole cheesy mantra that gets put around. But bottom line, Star Trek Beyond was a great film. It's the best of the new movies, in my opinion. And while I'm reticent to rank it, within the classic films, if I did, it would be pretty high up. It would be really high up there. It just hit everything that I wanted it to touch on. Had a lot of fun. It was great. I mean, like even in the beginning, like they're showing people on, because they're on the 5-year mission, they're showing people having sex. Like they're admitting that sex is a thing in space and that there's relationship problems and all this different stuff. I was like, oh, this is fucking great. And there's Orion women. Woohoo! Yeah, baby. Anyway, all right, that's enough. I'm done there. Go see Star Trek Beyond. Believe me, it's worth your time. I'll come back next week. Maybe next week I will be back in the studio. Thank you so much to everybody that's donated through Patreon. Of course, you can donate otherwise. Go to donate.zog.ninja, and you can find the Patreon link there as well. Or you can go wishlist.zog.ninja if you want to donate equipment to us so that we can build our second studio. All very exciting stuff going on. That's enough for this week. Carpe Lucem, everybody. Woo! I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.